Welcome to Maine, we're stretched to the bone. Prices keep rising, the paycheck stays prone. Inflation keeps knocking, won't leave us alone. They're selling the lie, groceries climbing, the gas tank is low. The bill's hitting harder than snow, but silence still blankets the truth. Where does it go? They're selling the lie. Housing is gridlocked from Portland to the county. Workers commute far past what feels soundly. Talk of solution comes yearly, not loudly. They're selling the lie.
Welcome to the Muddy Waters Podcast, where Mainers tell their stories, unfiltered.
Good morning, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and as always, you're watching the Muddy Waters Podcast. And the Muddy Waters Podcast exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on in our state, in part by interviewing people from around the state, talking about what's really happening, and highlighting. I think this will play in a lot to what we're going to talk about today, in telling you the stuff that the mainstream media either doesn't know how to effectively tell you correctly or doesn't want you to know, and so intentionally misleads. And so we are fortunate to have with us once again Leilen Strife, who is the primary petitioner, I think is the way to put it, on the Protect Girl Sports and Spaces ballot initiative, and the face of the Maine Girl Dads. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, it's always a good time. You always have some really good stuff to say. Last time I had you on, you were at the place where it was before some of the additional drama has come along, where they were at that point they had only just changed or created the horrific wording of how it was going to appear on the ballot. Since obviously there's been a lot that's happened, so rather than me trying to walk through that, if you want to kind of talk about what's happened since then, and then where we're at today. It's been a lot, right?
Oh man, we might use up a lot of time on that. Yeah, why don't I try to give everybody, and maybe I'll even just for a minute and a half rewind before that, and then give how we got there, and then what's happened since. So if everyone remembers, the ballot initiative itself, this citizens initiative, is an act to designate school sports participation and facilities by sex. It's pretty much the entirety of the bill. That's all that it does. We collected 80,000 signatures, submitted them on February 2nd. On March 17th, it was validated by Shenna Bellows. 2 weeks later, an opposition group formed, led by the Women's Lobby of Maine, and they hired the Mark Elias Law Group, 8 lawyers from out of state, that came in and sued the Secretary of State, trying to invalidate the petition. And sort of a parallel path of a couple of things ended up happening at that point. So one is a court took a look at their lawsuits and all of their allegations and complaints, and threw out 98% of them, and a couple of them sent back to the Secretary of State and said, hey, look into this. I will come back to that. And then at the same time, Shenna Bellows went and wrote a draft question and put that out for public comment, which I think is close to the time when we were talking, as you were saying, Chuck. That public comment on that question, so the question was pretty biased. There was things in there that were factually incorrect, like it said gender instead of sex, for example. There was a huge outpouring of engagement and support around that public question, asking for change. So everyone knows any citizens initiative in the history of Maine has only gotten a couple of dozen at most public comments on the question. The largest, response to date before ours was actually voter ID, which got about 300 responses back to the Secretary of State asking for change on the question. And ours was 10x that, over 3,300 public comments. So it is over 10x the largest response for any ballot questions, any citizens initiative in the history of the state, which is pretty telling for how much people care about this. That did lead to very meaningful change on the question itself. The question has gotten a lot better. There were several different things that changed. On the parallel path, there ended up being an evidentiary hearing by the Secretary of State's deputy on the few allegations that the court said go ahead and take a look into. Long story short, the Secretary of State ended up essentially taking the exact legal arguments and beliefs of the out-of-state lawyers and invalidated the petition, having us, go from over 3,000 above the threshold of 67,000 valid signatures that we needed to 500 below that we needed. That then went back to the Superior Court. They took her argument and said, okay. We appealed it through the Supreme Court of Maine, and I can get into after this sort of, what were the arguments there and sort of what is case determinative, what is the sort of outlier as to why we're below right now. But essentially the Supreme Court of Maine agreed with the Superior Court's decision and left us invalidated. We are currently, though, not giving up that fight to be on the ballot, and we are in federal court right now, looking to reverse that decision and revalidate 1,400 signatures that the Secretary of State has invalidated to be able to get us back onto the ballot for this November. That was a lot. That was a mouthful.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So deep into all those pieces.
And I feel like there are potentially some other elements too, from what I understand, is we're trying to raise money for a whole different situation. I think I don't know if that's separate from the federal court piece, right?
That is the federal court piece, actually. So yeah,
okay.
we had two legal battles: the Supreme Court of Maine, which that outcome has happened. It is adverse to us, like I said, and left us 500 signatures below the threshold. We've had the funding to get through that. This is an incremental lawsuit that we are fundraising on right now because we're about halfway to what we actually need to see that litigation through.
Yeah, and I think we've also had some lawyers, maybe give of their time to be able to help us get to this point as well, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Our lead lawyer, Tim Woodcock, great dude, super smart guy. He's been our lawyer for the past several months. He actually, really donated his time to actually, create the complaint that ended up going into federal court. So he gave us a really big running start, but we do need to fund not only, his time, but we've got, a team of lawyers that are lawyers that have defended Title IX in federal court already and are doing so actually on behalf of other school districts in Maine. And we need to be able to fund them through the litigation that will happen for the rest of July, but then all through August.
And what is the complaint essentially that caused the ballots, the signatures to be invalidated or considered invalidated, even though, because I think it sounds like we were 3,000 above, so 3,500 were pulled off. And then from there, why, what's the line of reasoning, and why are obviously we're trying to get them back on so we can get it back on the ballot, because the people of Maine are with us on this and they want this to happen. They wanted the legislature to do it. They refused to do it. And now we have to do it ourselves, essentially. But what was the line of reasoning that was?
Yeah. And also just to build on that too, not only do we and the people of Maine, 70% of Maine, want sex-designated sports and spaces in schools. I mean, this is a winning issue and something that Mainers want to be able to debate and pass. But also what we're fighting for is not only sort of their right of hey, common sense, we should be able to vote on this, but also our right as citizens to petition the government and to be able to commit our own legislative act. The role of the Secretary of State per the Maine Constitution and a citizen's initiative is to, quote unquote, facilitate, not handicap, a citizen's initiative. So as I go through the rest of this, I would say in your mind, think about, is she facilitating or is she handicapping the process here? And in doing so, disenfranchising almost 73,000 Mainers that are valid voters that had valid signatures on the petition. So this deserves to be debated at the ballot box, because this is our right as citizens to commit legislative acts through a citizen's initiative when we have elected officials that are taking positions that are far more radical and at odds than the people voting them into power. So this is what this exists for. And the Secretary of State has erred in that she has not facilitated this process. She has handicapped it, but you can make your own determination when I go through this. The evidentiary hearing that led to a few thousand signatures getting invalidated had allegations of a few different things. So one is, duplicate signatures. There were some, that the Secretary of State's office or local municipalities, when they validated, didn't catch. I think there were a few hundred of those maybe. using ditto marks for, the town, which again, we argued you should be able to use ditto marks. Are you just looking to invalidate things, or are you looking to facilitate the process? If people were in Biddeford and then put ditto mark underneath for their town, and they were a valid voter with a valid signature, those were then taken off. There were things where notaries that notarized petitions, but then also collected petitions themselves, since they had done both of those things, were invalidated as well. Something that we argued was, at odds with their First Amendment right. The others were things like seeing the petitions, having the petitions be signed when they were unattended, where people took their eyes off them or went to the bathroom. I would say that was a mixed bag. Some of those were, testimony that even the Secretary of State's deputy was like, no, that sounds like somebody actually was there and saw those. And then there were others that were still questionable, that were invalidated. So again, a handful, maybe we're talking 500, 600, 700 signatures at that point that were invalidated. And then some where people did not match the signature in the voter rolls, where their signature just didn't match. And that could be because it was old. It could be because there were people that tried to sabotage these signatures as well on the petitions, which are things we saw people posting on Reddit about of, I'm going to go and I'm going to write a bunch of Democrat names on there and sign them. So there are things like that could have ended up leading to that as well. But again, we're talking 30 or 40 signatures. So if you look at all of those, they're sort of starting to add up. The biggest determination, and this is sort of the biggest delta right now and the thing that we're fighting for, is that when you circulate petitions, whether you live in Maine or you don't live in Maine, you fill out a sheet. And that sheet basically says, if called upon, you will abide by Maine law. You got to fill out your name, your address, you got to sign the thing, and then there's a box. You just got to check one of two boxes. You live here or you don't live here. There were 4 people from out of state that filled out that whole form, signed it, submitted it with their petitions, that just didn't see the box and didn't check the box. So all of their signatures are valid, 1,500 signatures that these 4 people collected. Just one of them, her name's Cairo, she collected over 1,400 signatures. Signatures that the Secretary of State has continued to say, those signatures themselves are valid signatures, but because she didn't check that box, they're all being removed from the petition and they're going to be invalidated. So what ended up happening, and this is where I think that the real harm has been done here, is when she heard about that in March, she immediately met with a lawyer and signed an affidavit saying that was a clerical oversight. I abide by Maine law, always did, always will. Then she joined at the evidentiary hearing. What's interesting is the Secretary of State and these out-of-state lawyers subpoenaed a bunch of people to show up at the hearing. They didn't subpoena her 1,400 signatures, because those signatures were valid and they didn't want her to show up at that hearing and to be able to talk about the fact she was abiding by Maine law. Well, we had her show up. She showed up, was a total pro, said that was a clerical oversight. She re-signed the paperwork, submitted the paperwork that day, said she was abiding by Maine law. That's why she was there, why she was at the hearing. She always did, and all of her signatures are valid. Even the Superior Court, when they remanded that issue to the Secretary of State, said that could be a curable issue. That if that paperwork was, then just checked, that it could be an issue that was ultimately cured. Well, the Secretary of State and the out-of-state lawyers disagreed with that, disagreed with, her testimony and the fact that she showed up, and they decided that they're still going to invalidate 1,400 signatures that are valid signatures simply because this woman checked the box later than they wanted her to check the box.
Yeah, I mean, there's questions. Like, it sounds like there's I think that you said the court basically said that could be cured, right? So we know that it's legally possible, that this is basically a decision that's being made by the Secretary of State's office. Absolutely. But there's also, but separate from that, there's when you're in a position of leadership and you need to be able to differentiate between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, right? And a mistake like this it might technically be a violation of the letter of the law, but again, as noted, curable. But the spirit of the law is these are 1,400 people. This is the part that that Shenna Bellows and her cronies do not care about. I mean, it's easy to know this when we're dealing with Shenna Bellows because we're talking about the person who tried to keep Donald Trump off the ballot, exactly. Right? And so we know that she does not care. Like, she claims to be fighting to protect democracy, all the while she is trying to keep the people of Maine from being able to vote for who they want in the presidential election and vote for the issue that they care about. And as you've noted, the most support, most people have commented on the language of any other, like I think 10X you said, that of any other ballot initiative. And so this is something that people of Maine are really passionate about. And she doesn't seem to care. It's interesting because, like, I'm glad we're having this conversation, because all that I'd ever heard about were the situations where some of the collectors of petitions hadn't been at their station and somebody had come up and signed. Those were the only types of invalidations that I'd heard about prior to this conversation. And I was like, okay, obviously that's something they shouldn't be doing. But at the same time, there's also the way that I look at it, right? I'm like, but those signatures are the signatures of the people. They were validated by the town, and I know how the towns work. I had a signature invalidated by somebody who I was like, I know this person. I've known him for years. I know who he is. He signed with his left hand because he has an injury with his right hand, and so his signature looked different, but it was definitely his signature, and they still invalidated it. Fortunately, we had enough and it didn't matter. But I was like, I kind of argued with the clerk, not argued, but I was like, but I know this person is a registered voter. I know where they live. I was at his house. I got his signature. It's with his left hand. And she's like, well, there are a couple of reasons and so, but there's no art. So like, they invalidate people for not having the right signature. At the towns. And so the town and the state both verified that these were the legitimate signatures of voters in the state of Maine that wanted this, and they're removing them because of a technicality, which they don't have to, because they don't want this on the ballot. Because two reasons. One, they're ideologically captured and or compelled by their base to continue to keep this from this law from being passed. But two, they don't want the voter turnout that it would bring to this year's election, because it would inevitably draw out more conservatives and people to vote, even independents, more people in general, and those people would more likely vote along Republican lines. And so it seems obvious to me that that's the motivation behind this.
100%. And I think it's not only driving incremental conservative turnout, it's also driving disillusionment with the Democratic Party amongst Democrats. So it's not only like that more conservatives are going to show up. This shines more of a light on an ideological divide within the Democratic Party. We are, I would say at least equal parts Democrat to sort of Republican and independents that are part of the Maine Girl Dads and part of the team that have been, pushing this issue forward. Even when it comes to our fight in the Supreme Court of Maine, we obviously, as a committee, had a brief that ended up going to the Supreme Court as we made our legal arguments. But there was an amicus brief that was also submitted that, again, the media doesn't want to pick this up. That amicus brief was submitted on behalf of the disenfranchised voters that signed those petitions, that now their signature has been removed. And the person that submitted that amicus brief to the Supreme Court is Cynthia Dill, a Democrat and a lifelong Democrat who served in the House and the Senate and the Judiciary Committee. And she was out there collecting signatures for us and now submitting legal briefs to the court to try to change the outcome of this, to ensure that this is something that can get voted on. So, you're right. It's incremental conservative turnout, but it's also disillusionment with the Democratic Party, which is growing. And Shenna Bellows herself had a lot of, opportunistic reasons to invalidate this as we went along. And there's a couple of things that I think are worth noting. One is, if you look at the evidentiary hearing that she held, the majority of the people that showed up to give testimony saying that, our circulators had left their sheets unattended and things like that, 3 of them out of, I think, 5 that showed up to be able to testify were either from Planned Parenthood Action or the Maine People's Alliance, both of which had endorsed Shenna Bellows before that hearing. Kind of curious. How is that possible? Shenna Bellows then, when she announced whether or not this was being invalidated, held a press conference to be able to talk about it. lo and behold, that press conference was like 2 days before the Democratic primary. Like anyone that takes a look at that and sees, doesn't see bias inherently within this, doesn't see handicapping of a citizens initiative process opportunistically for somebody's own political and personal benefit. I don't know. I think maybe you have blinders on, because that's clearly happening here.
Yeah, 100%. Well, it's interesting because I knew that she had to make a decision prior to the primary, and some people were trying to argue that she was going to let it stay on the ballot, and I was like, I mean, she's got to win the DSA. She's got to win the radicals in order to be able to win her gubernatorial race. Maybe if it was after the primary and she had won and she recognized that there was a need for her to, gain more independent and Republicans onto her side, maybe at that point, if that's when the decision had to be made, she might have, been more reasonable, but she's not. But even that, as I had kind of said when we had you on last time, I just don't trust. She is an operative. She is not somebody who's in any way interested in doing what's right for the people of Maine, as she is evidenced by multiple different questions over time. And, she's not interested in transparency. She's not interested in doing what's right. So even if she's not on the ballot, I still don't think she's going to do this, because she's, I think a part of it is she's got people that she is loyal to and issues that she's loyal to, but she knows that she may be hated by the people of Maine, but she's going to be given some sort of an opportunity, assuming the Democrats win. I mean, one of the statements that was made, I don't know if it was made by Shenna herself. I think it was made by all three of them, actually, but Shenna, Troy, and Hannah, when they all made their pact, and they're like, if you don't vote for me, vote for one of them too, and just rank us 1, 2, and 3. And then whoever, or even when they were doing debates, they basically said that we're being friendly with each other, because whoever wins is going to put the others in their administration. Right. And so there's this, I'm still, doing things for the movement in order to advance my career, even if it's not winning an election this year.
100%. I also think that money is involved. Lobbying money is heavily involved in this. I mean, they want these radical groups pushing this agenda to be able to fund them in their campaigns now and in the future. And I'll give you an example of if anyone wants to say, well, where is that money? We would estimate that the amount of money that the Maine Women's Lobby has somehow found to be able to fund the Mark Elias Law Group, which is pretty famously funded by Soros, is likely between $500,000 and $800,000 over the past 3 months, given what their average bill rates are and the number of lawyers that they've had associated with this. So that is a massive amount of money that actually does not need to be reported in the campaign financing disclosures, because lawsuits are handled a completely different way for in-kind contribution. So that is what we all love to call dark money. And that is a massive amount of money that is coming in from lobbying to be able to do one thing, and that's to shut down the democratic process here in Maine. We all want to talk about save democracy, but I guess we don't care as much about saving democracy anymore when there is money and personal opportunity behind that.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many examples that we could point to of how the Democrats it's all about speaking points. And when they talk about saving democracy, all they mean is we need to get rid of Donald Trump. We need to get rid of the Republicans. We need to eliminate the choice. We need to have one party. And somehow that's pro democracy, because that party is called the Democrat Party. And so therefore, anyway, it's really nonsensical. And one of the things I usually advise people is don't try to understand insanity. It might hurt it might not go well for you, right? And so but the reality is it's all lip service. They don't actually care. If they cared, saving democracy would mean allowing people to vote for what they want to vote for, which is this issue, which was Donald Trump in 2024.
Absolutely. And it's a great disservice. I do want to make sure that people are aware too. This is a citizens initiative. Isn't just like people signing a petition. It is literally our own legislative act. It is our own ability as citizens of the state to do direct democracy, to petition the government on our behalf. What that means is we go around the legislature. we as individuals become legislators of the state. By signing that, you're not just signing a petition, you are committing a legislative act. This is a powerful thing as a citizen of this state. So this is, I just want people to sort of like understand how profound it is to actually sign onto a referendum. You're committing a legislative act you as a citizen are becoming a legislator of the state to be able to sign that. And so this is more than just invalidating a bunch of signatures. This is invalidating not only a bunch of voters, but a bunch of citizens that have committed legislative acts. And now a Secretary of State has put her thumb on the scale here to be able to invalidate their act and their signatures. It's a pretty remarkable outcome of where we're at. And I think the other thing on this too is that to go back to your point of why is this happening? And the real reason it's happening is, sure, there's probably money and lobbying and a radical base that they need to be able to keep happy, but also is this idea of we want to affect turnout when it comes to this year. What's crazy is that this is going to be voted on no matter what. There is no world in which this does not go to a public vote at the ballot box. The question is simply, when is it going to happen? Is it this November? Is it next November? Or is it November 2028? Whenever it happens, it will certainly pass based off of polling that only continues to climb across the state. The majority of every single political party wants single-sex sports and spaces in schools. This is common sense issue right here. The question is simply, it's not is it going to pass? It's just when. When is it going to pass? And they don't want it to be this year, not because they care about the law at the end of the day. It's because they simply care about voter turnout. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, and I think they also know that I think it will pass no matter what, but they can rally more people in a non-election year, right? And so they're hoping their best chance of defeating it would be having it hit the ballot next November. But either way, yeah, I mean, it's all about voter turnout, and it's all about trying to suppress voter. The people who are always talking about how Republicans are trying to suppress voter turnout, right? Remember how they keep saying that? And yet they're the ones that are actually trying to suppress voter turnout. And why are we here, right? Let's talk about this. Why are we in this situation? Why is this not being passed by the legislature? Like, when we have to do ballot initiatives like this is a failure of our elected representatives and our elected officials to do their job. So it's a specific failure of Shenna Bellows to do her job that it's not currently, as of today, set to be on the ballot. We're not finished. You guys are not backing off. We're going to the federal courts to try and make sure it comes on the ballot this year, as it should. But if it's not, it's because of a failure of the people who were elected, specifically Shenna Bellows, who was elected by the legislature. And she was elected by the legislature because we, as Republicans, your group is nonpartisan. I'm a chair of the Cumberland County Republicans, and we failed to elect the right people. We lost control of the House, and as a result, being able to be the ones that were kind of deciding who is going to be appointed to be, what's the title for those positions? But anyway, these appointments, not appointments, but these positions like Secretary of State, Attorney General, these positions, because if we had gotten like another 100 votes in specific districts, we would have had enough people to be able to make sure that somebody like Shenna Bellows or Aaron Fry, who is like, instead of doing his job and being focused on like public safety, is suing oil companies that don't have any business in Maine for climate change, right? Like that's what, and soundproofing his office at tax dollar expense. Like, these people are in the positions that they're in because we need to vote in common sense people, which there are some independents and there are some Republicans that are common sense. And so, we need to get the right people in Augusta because this shouldn't be, we should have passed this in the legislature last year. It hit the legislature. I was there, testified. I know, and they had an opportunity to pass it themselves again this year. And I know you were there and you testified at that. And our elected legislature failed us because they're partisan hacks ultimately, who refuse to question the ideology of the party, even though their voters, their voting base is not in line with them. And so we need to vote them out. And so whether this is on the ballot or not, we need to show up and we need to vote for people who are in favor of common sense policies, and get to a place where we don't have to go through these kind of efforts to be able to pass bills.
Completely. I mean, it's exactly right. I mean, it's a complete failure of partisanship. It's a complete failure of Augusta. We as, people of Maine have done all the right things, petitioned the Maine Principals Association a year and a half ago, saying a line to federal Title IX. Obviously, they didn't want to. The legislature, I know Laura Libby and others tried to do some stuff, but again, votes down party line. Nobody wanted to do anything. Again, this year, when we present, after we had the successful referendum and it was presented to the legislature, votes down party line. Nobody wants to do anything. And I think, like, you even pull the aperture out from our referendum, there are school districts, that have elected the right people, what we need to do in Augusta and to solve this for the state, but school districts that elected the right people that then change. I think there's maybe up to 9 of them at this point, somewhere between 7 and 9 school districts that have voted their own policies to be in line with federal Title IX. Actually, their policies are very close to the policy of the referendum that we want to have enacted. And I think what's even curious about that is when that happened at the end of the summer, the Maine Human Rights Commission said that they are not going to take any action against any of those school districts that had voted those policies. And I think by the end of the summer, there were 5 of them. Then a few weeks later, our referendum got approved. And it got decided that we were going to be on the November ballot. And right before the November ballot ended up hitting, they changed course and said, actually, no, we are going to take action and we're suing all of those school districts now. And so you look at every turn, not only is there a failure in Augusta of them just not doing anything when they should do something, but in fact, doing the opposite. Of now, citizens are saying, you guys are out of your effing minds. Like, we're going to be changing our own policies then because you won't listen to us. And now the state is suing them, saying that you're creating discrimination in a world where, Aaron Frey, right after the Supreme Court decision, the United States Supreme Court, post this whole thing about how we're going to fight for Maine law, and the Supreme Court of the United States just gave every state the right to go ahead and discriminate against people. Like, I don't know if maybe he didn't read SCOTUS blog and he has no idea what the outcome of it actually is, because it said the opposite of that. And now we have federal Title IX, that we have a Supreme Court, a 9-0 decision. Every Supreme Court justice said Title IX not only is a federal civil right, it is specifically a sex-based, not gender-based civil right. Every single one of them said that. And then 6-3 said, and enacting that, you are creating equal opportunity for everybody. You are not creating discrimination. In fact, you're doing the opposite. You are creating an equal playing field for everybody because everybody has a sex. So what we are doing as a state not only defies common sense, it also defies and is an affront to federal civil rights laws. We have people that are not only not doing anything in Augusta, they're literally doubling down on discriminating against children that are asking for single sex spaces and sports in the state. It is literally insane.
Yeah, it's wild. And the fact that Ketanji Brown Jackson joined and said that it's by sex when she's not a biologist is very surprising, how she could come to that conclusion, because she doesn't know what a woman is, she said, because she's not a biologist. That's one of my favorite
confusing argument, even though she voted on as part of that. If you read what she wrote, it barely makes sense, and she's conflating gender and sex as she goes. So clearly she's still not a biologist.
She's still confused on what a woman is, which is no surprise. But yeah, I mean, to your point, yeah, Title IX is about sex, and they're currently discriminating against biological women, or as we used to call it, women, and girls. In favor of people, a small minority of people who really are it's not fair, and it's not safe for our girls, and that's the issue.
It's inequitable. I mean, I have no problem if someone has a gender identity. Cool, like that's different than their sex. Like, go for it. That's okay. But the reality is, and this is why the Supreme Court ruled that way, very few people have a gender identity, let alone a gender identity that is incongruent with their sex. Literally every human being on the planet has a sex. It's the one innate common immutable thing that we all share. We all have a sex. So if you prioritize one that not everybody else has, you're creating an unequal, inequitable situation. You're creating discrimination, which is what's happening right now. And there are young females that are saying, I want a single sex space, that we're saying you can't have it. You don't deserve it. That is not only immoral, it's literally illegal.
Yeah.
And we allow it every single day. And I think one of the most things that maybe got me the most fired up over the past week, and I think should get everybody fired up on every side of the political fence, is in the wake of all the Graham Plattner stuff. So Graham Plattner does unspeakable, terrible things, obviously targeted women. Rightly so. All of these people come out and say, well, we should believe women. That's courageous that they came forward with this testimony. We should believe them. No one should do that. And since we believe them, Graham Plattner should step out and other people should step in. I don't disagree. What I find really hypocritical in that whole situation is that all of those people that are standing up now and saying you should believe women are all the people that are now running for his senator position to be able to run against Susan Collins. And they're only deciding to believe girls and women when there is a, personal, selfish, opportunistic, and political reason for them to do it. Now they get to run for Senate. What about believing women and girls, regardless of their age, regardless of the outcome for your own, personal political ambitions? What about all of the girls that testified on April 14th in Augusta in front of the Judiciary Committee that detailed instance after instance of voyeurism, masturbation, violence, and mental trauma from forcing them to undress next to or compete against males without their consent? When do we care about the personal boundaries of females and the sex-based rights of females? Do we always care about it, or do we only care about it when it gives me a second chance at running for a government position when I failed last month? Is that the only time we care?
Yeah, and it also depends on which women we're talking about, right? Because when it comes to that situation with Graham Plattner, there were other allegations that they disregarded because of somebody's political affiliation or this person being a perceived activist. And there were, what's interesting is the person who eventually came forward that they now believe had already come forward and was cited in the same New York Times article, in which I think it's Fifield was the woman's name, that was determined to be, a conservative activist. But she was one of like 3 or 4 or more, but at least one of 2 that I know of for sure, women who were featured in that New York Times article, which itself largely masked a lot of what had happened and only focused on some issues, but not all of them, which is part of the reason that this woman she was so frustrated by the fact that what happened, she's now coming forward, but we already had it, right? So you're absolutely right to focus on the political convenience of it. Is they decided, I think in part because Graham Plattner had fallen behind in the polls already, that he's not viable. He's not going to be able to win. It's too much. And so this information came out and they latched onto it and tried to convince him to back out so that they could jump in. And it's interesting because we've been talking about this on the conservative side. Like we've been speculating that this was going to happen for like the last couple of months, that Plattner was eventually going to become intolerable with all the stuff. I think it really peaked. There were concerns before, but it really peaked when the porta potty stuff came out because, people don't like that. Like you hear about that and you get this like really visceral, like, right. Yeah. And around that time, it's like, he's not going to make it, they're going to get through the primary and then they're going to replace him. And now they're doing it, right? And they have their excuse and they're calling it believe all women when they mean believe all women when it's convenient for us.
100%. I mean, which is absolutely hypocritical and is something that, I see driving greater disillusionment in the Democrat Party right now. I mean, and across the entire state, I think people are really fed up with it. It goes back to the exact reason we need a citizens initiative like this, because this is the type of people that we have in Augusta. People that say one thing, but do something completely different. None of them will weigh in about the girls that have been testifying about this stuff. Not one of them. If you look at every single thing that these people have said on the campaign trail, it's that we're demonizing a small group of children and we're creating discrimination. It's literally the opposite. Take 5 minutes out of your day to watch the testimony of these girls that have said, I'm being forced to do this against my consent. Talk to the 8th grader that I met that said this stuff at our turn-in event and said that she's got to go hide in a single stall in the bathroom to be able to change every day because there's boys that just go into the locker room to be able to watch them change. You don't care about girls and women. You care about being able to run for Senate. That's it. It's all performative. And that's what I think is crazy about all of it too, is like, do I really believe that each one of them individually believes the thing that they're saying? Of course not. Of course I don't believe that they think that. They're not idiots. They're all smart people. They're all much smarter than I am. Of course they know that biological sex exists. Of course they know that that is a federal civil right that has existed for 54 years. And of course they know they would never put their daughter in the situation of having to, forcibly undress next to a male when she said, I don't want that, I feel unsafe. Of course they wouldn't. But they're going to go say that in front of the cameras. And all of them have said that. Every single one of those people that are running right now have said those things on the campaign trail.
Yeah. How do we this is just, again, one of those issues and things where it's just like, how, if we rewind the clock, even, definitely before COVID, right? But I don't think anybody could have imagined that we'd be here before COVID, although there was some of this stuff was already happening around the state from some of the testimony we've received, but I don't think we would have believed that we would be here, right? That this, if you had told us 10 years ago that, hey, people are going to be males are going to be winning women's sports events, people would be like, you've lost your mind. Not in America. No way that's going to happen in America. America's way too feminist to allow something like that to happen in particular. And here we are, and we're being led to believe that we're the crazy ones for thinking the same things. It's just how do we get here? And then how do we get back?
I actually think that there's a very small minority that doesn't actually believe what we're saying. However, I think that there's a large group of people that this is what I think is actually more terrible, is they know that what they're saying is wrong. They know that continuing to say that girls should be forced to do this in locker rooms and bathrooms and playing fields is wrong, but they're still going to go and say it because they know that it is the opportunistic thing to do, either professionally or socially. And I think that's what's so insidious about the people that are unwilling to stand up and actually say the objective truth of the situation here. And you're right. COVID probably played a part in it. We all, got stuck in front of our computers and got, removed from, physical reality for a long time, during lockdowns. And I think we've created a bunch of weak people. And from a Maine Girl Dads perspective, a lot of weak men. It is really tiring. One of the things I can't stand, whether it's in Maine, but more, I see this all the time in California or in other states that are dealing with a similar problem. You see these press conferences of girls in high school that are all, in front of the cameras and behind the microphone, and they're all speaking up and they're all saying, this is crazy, this needs to stop, this isn't equitable, I want, my own space and my own sports opportunity. And then the people standing behind those girls are a bunch of women. And then there's maybe one dude. Where are the strong men, fathers of integrity, even if you're not a father of a daughter? Where are you? What are you doing? I know you're in your house telling your daughter and your wife, I'm going to stand up for you and protect you and do whatever I need to do for you. But then you go out into the world and you're not saying anything. You're not saying anything at work because you're worried about losing your job, which I get that. That's a reality. But where are the strong men that are willing to stand up and say what is real and true? And I do think that there are more people that are starting to be able to do it now and coming out of this sort of, forced haze of only saying and doing the things that are socially acceptable, to starting to get back to well, I can be strong and I can stand up and I can say something that might be, rub people a little bit the wrong way because, once I do, someone else is going to say it too. But we need more people to do that. I think COVID has weakened us. We've got, especially on the male side, not enough men are willing to say the hard things about this.
Well, the truth is that the whoever, we'll just say they, but have been, our culture has been socially conditioning men, especially white men, to think that they're not allowed to speak. we're specifically not allowed to speak about things having to do with women. And so this is a big part of the problem. And now one of the things that's happened, and where Maine Girl Dads, I think, has kind of been able to pull together people who this is a really great opportunity to give them the voice to speak. We're trying to give voices back to men, to be able to stand up to protect their daughters. You can speak now. This is inherent and innate in men, I believe. My understanding of manhood, one of the calls and the duties of being a man is to stand up for women and children. This is a central core of what it means to be a man. This does offend some people. I found out there was a girl I was dating at one point who said that offended her, and I was like, I don't know what to tell you. And so anyway, that's who I think I am. So anyway, so I think standing up for women and girl and children in particular is part of what manhood is. And yet we've been told we're not allowed to do that, and that's toxic masculinity. And it's like we need to be done with that nonsense. They're going to say anything that they want to say, but we need to stand up and speak up and show up. And I was tempted, when I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go and give testimony, and I remember having a conversation with my wife. I was going to be there. I was there. I knew I'd already made plans to be up there for it. And I was like, I don't know. And she's like, no, you need to. And I was like, I'm just thankful that I have that additional support, because it's not easy to go there, and you do kind of feel like, well, this is about women. I'm not supposed to be able to speak about this because I'm a man. But the reality is we need men to speak up, and we need more of them, as you said, and we need to empower them to do so. And so this is an issue. You can speak up about this, right?
Exactly. You should. I mean, we need to. You're right. It's coded into us as men, as fathers, as husbands, that we are going to honor and respect women. And I believe every woman wants, a man to be able to honor her and respect her personal boundaries and respect her rights and respect who she is as an individual. And that's exactly what we need to do. But we need to be able to do it in a much broader capacity, fighting for some of their most basic rights that they've literally had for decades. Of course, we should be doing that. Of course, sometimes that takes, a man being able to stand up as well. Like, we're not going to have girls, especially your daughters, fight for their own rights on their own. Or you take that a step further, and obviously outside of the confines of the referendum, but things like our jails. This is where this ends up going, where now, we deny girls the ability to have their own space. We're forcing them to undress next to males when they said, I don't want to, you don't have my consent. And not only does that now happen in schools, it's literally happening in the penitentiaries in Maine. We have females suing the state because they're being sexually harassed by a 250-pound male murderer that identifies as a woman. That is not made up. Like, that's not like some rumor on Daily Mail. Like, that is a reality, and there's an active lawsuit actually going back to Cynthia Dill, who's the lead lawyer on trying to undo this craziness. Like, I mean, these are where these policies end up going. And who has gotten us into that policy? Of course, it's Equality Maine, but the other group that has gotten us into both the school policy and the prison policy is the Women's Lobby of Maine. Number one gaslighter of women in this state. And so we need men to show up and say, look, women, like, you're going too far. Like, your compassionate heart is amazing, but like you are cannibalizing your own rights. And we men see that affecting you, and we see it affecting our daughters. There are female rights that matter to, who they are as an individual, what their civil rights are, to their dignity, and those things must be preserved.
Yeah. Well said. Well, thank you, Leyland, for continuing to stand up and lead the Maine Girl Dads and lead this petition. And I'm thankful that one way or another it's going to get on the ballot. I hope it's this year. If everything, it seems like justice should means that it should be on the ballot this year. And so let's hope.
But if not, I mean, that is maybe just for one clarification, just so everyone knows, they got the facts totally straight on that, because the media is a little wishy-washy. We are right now fighting in federal court for those 1,400 signatures that we talked about with the out-of-state circulator to be revalidated. We believe that will happen in federal court by August 25th, in time to be able to get this onto the November ballot. If all else fails, The only thing we need to do is collect 500 more signatures and resubmit to the Secretary of State, and this will be on the next statewide election, which is either going to be 2027 or 2028. So it is inevitable. This will be voted on. Keep the faith. All of the media that's telling you it's over, it's not going forward, are out of their minds. They're telling you that because they want you to be disenfranchised. They want you to be demotivated. This is going to be voted on. This is going to pass. This is going to change in Maine. The question is just, is it going to change this November or is it next November? So stay engaged and keep the faith, but it's going to happen.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I appreciate that clarification and reminder. And so, And so thank you all for everything that you're doing. And anything else you want to say that if people want to know more information
if you want,
or help?
Yeah, if you want to help or you want to know more information, I think there's a couple of things. One, go to mainegirldads.com. You can sign up for our newsletter and just sort of stay involved. But the two things that are maybe more time sensitive and critically important would be, one, donate. Even if you can donate $5, we do have a significant legal gap right now to see through the federal suit that we talked about. Or number two is we do have a limited time merch shop that just opened. About a week ago. It'll be open for about one more week, that if anyone wants to get Maine Girl Dad shirts or hats, you can get them. We also have stuff where not everyone's a dad, not everyone's a girl dad. Stuff that was designed by girls that have testified that says things like stop the gaslighting, which is exactly what we want the Maine Women's Lobby and others to do, stop gaslighting our girls, or things that just rep the core mission of the referendum that say things like protect female sports and spaces. It's a lot of cool stuff. It's designed in Maine, produced in Maine, shipped out of Maine. So go check it out. You can get it off the website. And then, follow us on X. We're pretty active on X over other social platforms. So those would be sort of the next steps.
Okay. And mainegirldads.com, is that?
Mainegirldads.com. Exactly.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, look for the shorts, share them out so that we can continue to get the information in front of the people and make a difference and change our state for the better. Thank you. We'll see you